I am Michael Mays. I am the head chef for this show.
The economically free countries are always wealthier, and the ones that aren't. So
I'm saying, we tried that.
Okay, guys. Okay, guys. Let's marinate on that for a minute.
Conservative first and party second.
I'm a libertarian.
For the left on some topics, but most of the time it's center.
My responsibility is to stir all this up.
We need to focus our resources on that 2%.
So we need to profile.
Well, I don't know if profiling is the word I would use.
All right, Rob, what do you think? Let's stir the pot.
They don't get the lush luxuries a lot of bar criminals get.
Well, maybe the idea is to bribe your way out.
All right, welcome. Is there a constitutional right to health care? Should we as a nation even be concerned about this governmentally, or is it up to the individual?
There's no more constitutional right to have health coverage than there is to have a home. There are certain rights that are very clearly stated in our Constitution, and we need to do everything we can to protect those. You know, will there be better health care for people who can afford it? Well, yes. We live in a capitalistic society, and there are some things that some of us can afford and some that others can't. That doesn't mean that everyone's going to get thrown to the curb.
Wait. Constitutional right, health care, or it's
Article 1, Section 8, I think. Government has the right to provide for the general welfare. And I think that overall it is the general welfare of our citizens. If we have healthy citizens, we have strong workers. And it only makes us stronger. When we strengthen the lower class, people who wouldn't necessarily have access to our...
Okay, by the same token, though, if I want to sit at home and pour salt on everything that I eat and drink alcohol with every meal, you're telling me in my individual rights it's better for the general population of Americans?
There's always going to be those that fall through the crack, those that don't. It's like throwing away, you know, a bushel of apples because one's bad, one has a worm in it. You can't legislate for the exception.
You can't legislate for everything either.
You can't legislate for that's true too.
There are things that we have rights to, and there are things that we don't.
The human side of that it's just it's inhumane for that.
And some would say it's inhumane for government to tell me I have to buy health care.
If I walk in, well, they're not telling you have to buy health care, for one.
Or pay a fee or be locked up in jail.
That part of the current legislation, hold on, part of the current legislation states that you will either buy health care
or you do not get the tax credit for
or
the
you
healthcare.
will be fined for that. You will have to pay a fee for it. So it's costing you either you spend money on health insurance or you spend money on paying the fine.
Which is okay. That's fine too.
It is what it is.
Yeah, that's fine too, because what you're paying for is you're paying for that hospital bed that's waiting for you when you have an accident. If I'm uninsured, then if I have an accident, I have a hospital bed waiting for me. I have a doctor waiting for me. I've got a surgeon waiting for me. But it states that you cannot be imprisoned for not paying that fine.
Which then begs the question, why have the fine then? I mean, if you can't enforce it, why have it in legislation?
It's part of your income tax. I mean,
we don't want somebody to go without health care. I still think that and I agree with you, I don't think we should, somebody who doesn't want to contribute to another's health care should have to. The only way out of this, the only way out is to reduce the cost of health care. And the only way to do that without rationing is to get rid of the waste in the health care system. And that's mostly government run.
That's a really great point. All right, let's stir the pot. Let's just ask the question. If I'm your constituent and I'm against the health care legislation, the majority of your constituents are against it, do you vote for it or not?
If you're against it, I'm voting against it as well. I mean,
why?
Well, because I'm supposed to be representative of my constituents first and foremost, right?
Well, but Wade says you're smarter than I am as my representative of my constituents.
What happens if
I don't agree with
what
Wade
happens
on
if
that
something
point
that's if your constituents are opposed to something that's a moral issue or something? Are you going to vote? Are you going to vote for that? I mean, it's just like I said back in the Jim Crow laws. I mean, their constituents are saying, "I don't want to vote for this," but they still.
Well, I don't know what we're saying when we say all of their constituents. We're simply talking about a poll. Majority. I can't speak to the polls on that, but what I can say is that the concern that has been brought up by the right is this idea that we don't even know what was in the legislation. We as the people didn't have a chance to read it, let alone those that are smarter than us.
Well, and not only that, but they wrote themselves out of it. So they're supposed to be voting for my interests on a piece of legislation that they've taken themselves out of and don't have the same, don't have to even live within it. So, luckily there's already some changes being discussed.
We're referring to the members of Congress not falling under the same medical care.
Exactly. There are already some representatives who are pushing, I don't know what the status of that, but to get that straightened out, I think.
Mary, Vote for it, not vote for it. What does it say when your constituents are for it or against?
Well, frankly, I think the whole system is put together improperly, and that's why we're having this. When you think about it, what that poll says is that our legislatures are willing to not represent their constituents, even though that is what is supposed to be happening. And if you think about the psychology about being in a position of power, you can understand it, because they get courted by special interests all the time, and that's where their personal interest is.
But wait a minute, okay, but
so they've got the personal interest vying with the
let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that
to Wade's defense. If I'm elected as your representative, you elected me. So why wouldn't I vote my conscience, even if my constituents disagree with me? 100% of them disagree with me, but I've been put in this position. Well, I mean, maybe I am affecting my likelihood of being reelected, but why wouldn't I still? I'm the congressional member.
That's why libertarians don't think that this is a very good system. We believe that the individuals should choose for themselves. And what happens in a representative system like this is you get just the kind of disconnect that you're discussing. You have a disconnect because someone thinks they know better than their constituents, and having run for office a number of times, I will say that one of the first things I learned was that the people who were running for office were not necessarily at a level I would like my representative to be at.
Meaning what?
Meaning
education?
Just meaning the way they thought. I mean, they were not thinking logically in many aspects. They didn't have the facts. And when I presented them with the facts oftentimes, they simply didn't believe them, as we were discussing a little earlier. Now, I'm not saying all were like that. I'm just saying that you can't assume that because somebody's been elected that they are more knowledgeable than their constituent.
It's a great point. Let's put that on the back burner and move on to the next subject. Here in the United States, immigration is definitely an issue. It's an issue regardless of what side of the aisle you're sitting on, and the impact of immigration on us as Americans. It's big. So let's open up our discussion. If we provide amnesty for those that are here. And then let's just wave our magic wand and solve the poor legislation that you've said is out there for immigration. And then we're willing to enforce whatever this new immigration policy is going forward. Would that solve our problem?
Well, in my vision of the new legislation, yes. My vision of the new legislation would that everyone peaceful could cross the border, and we'd take those resources that we're now using to try to prevent people from crossing the border, and instead try to make sure we apprehend anybody who is doing physical harm or stealing, from other people.
I don't think it'll solve. I don't think it'll solve. This isn't a math equation where we can get a final answer. I don't think we can ever solve this problem. I think it's always going to be a problem. It's how do we minimize it?
Which aspect?
Of people coming across the border illegally.
Well, let's pose this question.
Yes, you're right, because a violent person who has a history of violence might come across illegally. Yeah. But the thing is, if we had resources focused on finding the violent people.
But supply and demand, if we take aside, I think there's a consensus that violent people that are committing acts of violence, terrorism, etc., felonious activity, across the board, all of you agree, it seems, that those committing felonies probably should be prosecuted, deported, whatever that problem. They shouldn't be allowed to continue the cycle. However, to Rob's point, I wonder if, even if the floodgates are opened, as Mary suggests, supply and demand is going to kick in. This is a capitalistic society. Wouldn't we, as Americans, the jobs are going to be reduced, the number of opportunities. So what would cause me to want to continue to come here if, oh, wow, engineers, there aren't really any openings for engineers, so I'm not going to go to America. I'm going to go somewhere else. Wouldn't that supply and demand level that out over a period of time?
If we also put a cease and desist on all the social programs that are in place even if they can't get a job, they can still come here and have a better life than what they left behind.
Let's put that on the back burner and move on to the next subject.